I knew Harvey Dent. I was his friend. And it will be a very long time before someone inspires us the way he did. I believed in Harvey Dent.
When I saw The Dark Knight in theaters for the first time, I didn't love it. I liked it a lot, but I was actually somewhat underwhelmed by it. After seeing it multiple times, however, I really started to get it, and today, it's one of my favorite films of all time. In the case of The Dark Knight Rises, the opposite actually happened. I liked this movie a lot the first time I saw it, but after having seen it numerous times by now, I have liked it less and less. I still don't think it was bad, but there are definitely bad things to it, especially in the retard middle. I think what might have happened is that at the end of the first act, Bane punches Batman so hard, the film itself got brain damage. This is the only explanation I have for the entire middle of the film. The Dark Knight Rises has specific kinds of problems that the other two films did not have. Namely, confused Matthew problems. And it actually reaches a point in the middle where it deserves a full-blown confused Matthew review. Yeah, it gets that bad. But the film as a whole doesn't deserve a confused Matthew review because it's not consistently bad. It gets off to an amazing start and pretty much stays good for the first hour or so of the film. And the ending is kind of a combination of good and bad, so I was a little confused as to where to put this review. There are parts in this film that are so brain dead, I almost did make this a confused Matthew review in the same way I reviewed Transformers, saying that I liked it, but that doesn't change the problems with it. But that just didn't work because it's not consistently bad enough to be a confused Matthew review, but it's not nearly good enough to be one of Matthew's favorite movies either. I honestly don't have a category for a film like this, and so the only place left was a Miniview. But be warned, this is going to be the least Miniview I have ever done for anything. We'll start with what I liked about the movie, and honestly, there isn't much about the first hour or so that I didn't like. The best thing about how the film opens is that we get to see how the events and decisions made at the end of The Dark Knight carry over to this film, and how the decisions affected everyone involved. The beginning of the film is all about the consequences of the last film, and they follow through on how The Dark Knight ended very well. Batman and Gordon concocted a lie in order to unite the people of Gotham and give them hope. And it worked. Organized crime no longer exists in Gotham, and for the first time in years, the city is safe. And all it cost Batman and Gordon was their very souls.
Sorry. I'm so terribly sorry, Mr. Wayne. It is Mr. Wayne, isn't it? Although you don't have the long nails or the facial scars, sir.
Is that what they say about me?
This is what that decision did to Bruce. We find him 7 years later as a broken and disheveled man who hasn't left the mansion in any appreciable way in years. As far as the cost of a lie goes, this one is seen to be very high. The Dark Knight is gone, and its reputation has been dragged through the mud. What does Bruce Wayne do after the fighting stops? Apparently not much. But there's more to Bruce's seclusion than just the shame brought to the name of Batman. One of my problems with The Dark Knight was how no one really seemed to react that strongly to Rachel's death. Something that wouldn't have bothered me that much if awful, suck-ass Katie Holmes had still been playing her, but Maggie Gyllenhaal actually made this character good. This was an important death, and everyone treated it as though it was just another part of the plot. Well, with The Dark Knight Rises, you can consider this a problem no longer. It seems like they saved all of that grief and toil and consequence for this movie, and they did a great job of it. Rachel's death was perhaps the primary reason why Bruce won't leave his mansion and live a life. She was his life, and now she's gone. What's interesting here is that while he hung up his cape and cowl, we see that Bruce hasn't let go of his vigilantism altogether. He still takes apparent trips down to the Batcave and does what little he can to fight crime in his own way. Being Batman in one form or another seems to be even more of an obsession now than it ever was. He just can't stop doing this, because he feels that this is all he has. His confrontations with Alfred are very effective in this regard. He cares for Bruce so much and wants so badly for him to make a better life for himself that eventually Alfred outright leaves, and the film stays firm on that point. Alfred does not come back after this. And that decision carries the theme of making a better life very effectively. Batman saved Gotham, but even after Gotham was saved, Bruce just can't let go. And the same can be said for Gordon as well.
When you and Dad cleaned up the streets, you cleaned them good. Pretty soon we'll be chasing down overdue library books.
Huh.
And yet, here you are, like we're still at war.
This is something that, again, follows through nicely on the previous film, as this all echoes of what the Joker did to these people. The last time they felt it was safe to let their guard down, they either lost or nearly lost everything. Bruce lost Rachel, Gordon nearly lost his son, and they both lost Harvey Dent. And now, even though the city is at its safest that it's ever been, the two must remain vigilant. Then we have Selina Kyle / Catwoman. Truth be told, as good as her character is, she doesn't really add all that much to the story. What she does add to is Bruce's character, as she gives him something that he's never really had before. Selina is a cat burglar who can alter her personality at will to take control of practically any situation. Altering your personality is one of the primary things Bruce does as Batman, and as Bruce Wayne, as he has to make people believe that he's an irresponsible, self-absorbed playboy. In that way, both characters are wearing a mask. Neither shows the world who they truly are. And even though this woman outright robs him in scene 1, Bruce feels a connection to someone for the first time since Rachel's death. So while she may not contribute a whole hell of a lot to the story, Selina definitely creates a new dynamic for this film. But the best character of all, and I mean through the whole film, is John Blake. It doesn't matter how bad this film gets, John Blake is a good character. And by good, I mean fucking good. He's the most real of all of these characters, maybe even throughout the entire series. He's so humble and comes from such humble beginnings, and he pulled himself out of those humble beginnings through his own efforts. This is a kid whose parents were killed and who grew up in a boys' home. He grew up to become a police officer, no less, and has seen the worst the city has to offer, and yet he still remains just and optimistic. The interesting thing about Blake is that while most of the characters in the series were inspired by Batman, Blake was inspired by Bruce Wayne becoming Batman in the first place, which makes Blake's inspiration actually a lot deeper than everyone else's, and he in turn inspires Bruce to try and get back into the game as Batman. Now, by now it should go without saying that these reviews contain spoilers, so here goes. At the end of the film, it's revealed that John Blake is Robin, and saving that for the end was brilliant. Unlike another retard thing they saved for the end, but we'll get to that later. The movie doesn't want you to like this guy because he's Robin. They want you to like him for who he is. And we do. We really do. After all, this guy is responsible for Batman going back out there in the first place. Watching Bruce try to go back out there after so many years, watching him try out his new gadgets and seeing how the city reacts to his return, and realizing that his coming back might not have 100% positive results, was a great joy. All of it. The action scenes were great, and the new gadgets were really cool. I didn't think I was going to, but I ended up really liking the Bat. I really thought this thing was going to be stupid, kind of like the Bat Pod, which I have finally warmed up to, but it took me a long while. Once I saw what the Bat was and how it worked, I was able to suspend my disbelief and accept its awesomeness. Indeed, as far as the action is concerned, the Dark Knight's presence has never been better. We don't actually see Batman very often in this film, but I think that actually works in the film's advantage, because when we do see him, it feels momentous. And then we have Bane. Now, just to give you all a heads up, and I'll go into a lot more on why in part 2, I don't think Bane is a very good villain. I actually think he kinda sucks. But his story is at least interesting in the beginning as far as it relates to Bruce. Bane was trained by the League of Shadows, which is the same organization that trained Bruce. He was eventually excommunicated and became a mercenary. Now, the whole following thing may seem a little off the point, but this is something that occurred to me as I heard this story, so consider this. In the animated series, Bruce was trained by an instructor named Yoru, and Yoru had a star pupil named Kyodai. No matter how hard Bruce fought, or how hard he trained, he just couldn't bring Kyodai down, and this was true even after he became Batman. The parallels between the Kyodai story and the Bane story are actually pretty striking. Kyodai was trained by the same organization that trained Bruce, just like Bane. He is the only physical match for Bruce, just like Bane. He was excommunicated just like Bane, became a mercenary just like Bane, and he strikes at Bruce both physically and by way of corporate sabotage against Wayne Enterprises, just like Bane. Now, I'm not saying that Nolan had this directly in mind when he came up with the Bane story, but even so, I always liked the story of Kyodai, and I've wanted to see something like this done for one of these films since these films began. I always liked the idea of this one guy from Batman's own past circle that Batman just can't take down, at least not as easily as any of his other foes. And as far as this story is concerned, The Dark Knight Rises does it very well, and it was a great pleasure for me to see that story on the big screen, finally. The idea of Bruce trying to be Batman again and failing is a good idea for a story. It's not your typical Batman story either. It's almost like one of the Rocky movies, particularly Rocky III. The seasoned veteran of his craft is trying to get back in the game, but someone hungrier and just as eager is opposing him. Everything about that story works, and when Bane finally takes Batman down, you really feel it. The first act or so of this film was genuinely good. Everything clicked. Everything that carried over from the last film was brought to fruition beautifully, and all of the new stuff was set up very well. It was beginning to look like this Batman film was going to be just as consistently good as the rest of them. But then we reached the middle act, and the whole thing goes full retard. Where to even begin? There are two separate yet equally retarded arcs going on in the middle of the film. What's happening in Gotham and what's happening in the stupid, dumb, moronic, brain-damaged retard prison. Since nothing actually happens in the prison, we'll start with what's going on in Gotham. See, in order for this story to work, the movie has to make everyone in the middle of the film stupid. And we begin that stupidity by how Gordon reacts to what Bane is doing in the sewers. He's told something is going on down there and that everything is about to come to a head, and even though there is no reason to go nearly this far, even though the following move is unprecedented both in this film series and in real life itself, Gordon sends every single police officer in Gotham into the sewers to flush out Bane. Now, even putting aside how counterproductive it is to send that many people with firearms into a confined space, even putting aside how unlikely it is that every single police officer in a city this size could even fit into a localized area of a sewer, even putting aside why they continued to enter the sewer even after Blake informed Gordon that there were explosives down there, even putting aside how Bane somehow magically knew that Gordon would get brain damage and decide to send every single police officer in Gotham down to the sewers. Even putting all that aside, actually no, I think I just covered every single problem with this. It's so stupid! This may seem like a small thing, but it's not. It is indicative of the movie changing everything we know about these characters for the sake of the plot. Even when presented with a spontaneous crisis, Gordon does not make off-the-handles stupid decisions like this. Look at The Dark Knight. When he was under the gun and a situation came up on him suddenly in that film, look how professionally and methodically he deals with the situation.
If Coleman Reese isn't dead in 60 minutes, then I blow up a hospital. I want you to call in every officer. Tell them to head to their nearest hospital and start evac and search. Call the transit authority, school board, prisons. Get every available bus down to a hospital. The priority is Gotham General. Wheel everybody out of that place right now. You come with me.
But in this movie, when faced with an equally surprising situation, Gordon just jumps at a one-size-fits-all solution and hits a big red button that says, "Send all men." But this sudden case of the dumbs doesn't just apply to Gordon either. No, not by a long shot. As soon as the second act begins, all of the people in Gotham suddenly and inexplicably become dirt stupid as well. For those of you keeping score, this is the third time a madman has tried to take over Gotham. The third. And every other time Gotham's freedom and safety and sanity is threatened, the people of Gotham react very consistently. In Batman Begins, they acted like this. In The Dark Knight, they acted like this. But when an equally mad man sets chaos ablaze in Gotham and takes over the city, the exact same people, under the exact same circumstances, love the hell out of this. Oh, they couldn't be happier that Bane is threatening to blow up the city if they don't do what he says. They'll pop the champagne bottles, hang out in a fool's court, and blindly believe anything that he tells these people. But before we analyze the people of Gotham's sudden lack of common sense, let's take a good long look at what Bane's plan is.
I learned here that there can be no true despair without hope. So, as I terrorize Gotham, I will feed its people hope to poison their souls. I will let them believe that they can survive so that you can watch them clambering over each other to stay in the sun.
So Bane is going to make the people of Gotham think they can survive so that he can kill them with hope. The problem is, he's making them believe that they can survive something that he himself is threatening them with. I'm holding a gun to your head, but don't worry, you can survive. Well, you're the one holding the gun, so I'm pretty sure only you can decide if I survive or not. No, it's okay. You can survive this. Right, but I'm just saying maybe it would be easier for me to survive if you didn't point the gun at me in the first... You can survive! Okay. You see, Bane has captured what is essentially an atomic bomb and is threatening to blow up the city if the people of Gotham don't be free. I'm serious, that is an accurate description of what he's telling these people. In one fatal swoop, Bane is presenting himself both as shining liberator and insane bomber, and the people of Gotham accept him on both terms.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Oh, not in this movie, Harvey. In this movie, people will apparently accept you as both at exactly the same time. Anyone with half a brain cell should be able to figure out that if Bane is telling you, live free or die, period, he's either an unstable nutcase to be feared, or he has some ulterior motive just like the other nutcases that tried to take over the city. And again, every single time this city has been thrown into this kind of controlled chaos, the people of Gotham have been bitterly opposed to that chaos. But now, because the movie needs the people of Gotham to be dumb, they suddenly believe anything and everything that Bane says to them, even when there is no reason to do so, or what he's saying to them is a complete contradiction, or it just makes absolutely no sense at all.
Now we come here not as conquerors, but as liberators to return control of this city to the people. And at the first sign of interference from the outside world, or from those people attempting to flee, this anonymous Gothamite, this unsung hero, will trigger the bomb.
Gotham is yours. None shall interfere. Do as you please. This great city, it will endure.
Yeah, this great city will endure. This thing that I'm doing to it. Think, you morons, think! Why would any bomber want you to endure the hard times that they specifically are putting you in? Usually if you're characterizing yourself as a liberator of people, you don't openly state that you'll kill them all in a vaporizing heat explosion if they don't allow themselves to be liberated.
Let me tell you the truth about Harvey Dent from the words of Gotham's police commissioner, James Gordon. The Batman didn't murder Harvey Dent, he saved my boy. Then took the blame for Harvey's appalling crimes so that I could, to my shame, build a lie around this fallen idol. I praised the madman who tried to murder my own child, but I can no longer live with my lie. It is time to trust the people of Gotham with the truth, and it is time for me to resign. And do you accept this man's resignation?
Well, considering we have no way of verifying that Gordon wrote that, and for all we know you're just making this up, we really shouldn't blindly believe you, but since the movie needs us to be dumb, oh yay, we believe you, ruthless overlord. But maybe I'm just being a little too Matthew on this one. Maybe I need to take a closer look at what Bane is offering these people
under pain of death.
So, what is Bane offering the newly liberated people of Gotham? Absolutely nothing. Bane claims that he's giving the city to the people. Well, I hope the people like ransacked buildings and living in squalor because the physical city is literally all they're getting out of this. Look how shitty this place is after Bane takes it over. I've seen homeless shelters that are nicer and better maintained than Gotham under Bane. But oh no, this is great! We've traded living in cramped, overpopulated squalor in a small place to living in cramped, overpopulated squalor in a bigger place. Yay!
What's that?
This was someone's home.
Now it's everyone's home. There's a storm coming, remember? This is what you wanted.
Who the fuck wants to live in someone else's house? That sucks! I mean, maybe if Bane was giving some of the rich people's money to these people, I could understand this. Maybe. But Bane fucked up the economy in the beginning. No one has any money now. The downtrodden of Gotham still don't have anything. Gotham can barely keep its power on. Oh boy, I sure am glad Bane gave us the city. Now I can live in a makeshift fort in someone else's house. It's so stupid! Oh, and look, they set up a lunatic court where a well-known madman sentences people to walking on thin ice until they fall in and die. That seems like a perfectly sane thing to do. Yeah, I'm totally on board with this. No, bullshit. No one in Gotham would be going along with this insanity. They might not openly oppose it as they don't want to get blown to vapor, but they certainly wouldn't be cheering in the background over it! And I mean, why bother making the story decision to trap every single police officer down in the sewer in the first place if no one can touch these people since they have a nuclear fucking bomb? And this is why I don't think Bane is a very good villain. No, it's not the voice, I can get past that. The reason I don't think he's a very good villain is because he doesn't do anything threatening. I mean, aside from physically assaulting you, but even there, a physical threat is never going to be as compelling as a psychological threat, and after he's beaten you up, there's really not much more he can do to you. Other than beating the hell out of people, all Bane really does in this movie is make speeches. The rest of what happens is conveniently handed to him by the plot, and as we've seen, it's only because everyone in the movie went dumb so he could do all this. He's the Scar of the Batman franchise. But the bottom line of why this plot doesn't work in the middle is this. The point of the first 2 Dark Knight films was that Gotham deserves to be saved. But if Gotham is this fucking stupid, they deserve to get blown to fucking smithereens.